Welcome to Academy of Tone 260. This is a very special episode on metal tones. We are heading towards the modern metal tones and of course with our expert Emanuel Knorr.
Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I'm having a nice time here chatting with my friend Thomas about modern metal tones. So what we did in the last episode was covering everything from the very first metal song, which happens to be NIB by Black Sabbath, until 99, which ended with Children of Bodom. And now we are heading into the 2000s, which is a kind of territory that I feel very comfortable in. How is it for you, Thomas?
Well, that's exactly where I'm losing it, and of course, exception make the rule. I you know, in any genre of music, there's very specific songs or music that touches me, and that's including metal. So I know a little bit here and there, but I'm not the expert. You are, and of course, back in the days in the 70s and 80s, metal was kind of still rock to me. You know, because where is Black Sabbath versus Deep Purple versus, you know, all these early bands, Dio, this is rock in my world, and it's a form of the evolution of rock. And then now the metal world can claim that as their origin, because this is kind of, when you look at the evolution in rock music, there were changes that were leading towards metal, which is now clearly metal. And I mean, they call Deep Purple a heavy metal band. I mean, they are classic rock today.
Yeah. That makes total sense, and this is something I don't get bored of mentioning, which I think some of my students who are in the teens and you know, in early semesters at university, when they do metal, they're kind of into the very modern stuff, which I also enjoy, like for example, Animals as Leaders and you know, these crazy 8-string thumping, selective picking style of
Tosin Abasi.
Yeah, the super percussive stuff. Yeah, it's amazing, but I'm never ever getting boring of mentioning that I'm always aware that what we do today with string skipping and sweeping and all these crazy stuff and these very percussive tones, it all goes back to the beginnings, because the guitar it's still, I mean, you can add as many strings as you want, but still it is flesh onto a string onto wood and yeah, exactly. This is where it's all coming from. So, and this is why we do the evolution of metal, even though it's not in the same kind of ballpark what they did in the 70s and 80s with nowadays music. Still, I mean, you cannot deny that these people developed what we are doing nowadays, right?
Sure. And it's all linked together, and there's always kind of bits and pieces showing up of historic rock things in the metal world as a quote, and sometimes even as a sub-style, and you know, all that. In the end, it's all music, and that makes it easy. But I want to talk a little bit about the tone side, about the amp side of the genre, and how the evolution came along, the history of metal tones. And I was thinking about an amp that I have had even in the 90s when I was a session guy, and this was a Marshall that I modded to be more focused and tighter in the low end. And this is exactly what I can find on these modern pedals like the Horizon Precision Drive. Let me show you a slight little demo of that. So this is so the last position is vintage Marshall original. And this that tightens up the low end with a low cut filter. And I think like position number 2 is the one that I would use with such a guitar. Yeah.
So this amp is doing things that it doesn't look like doing. Certainly. Well, that's very interesting, because I think a good introduction to also the tone side of things, as we were talking a little bit about the playing. You know, the kind of the basic ingredients of what makes a tone, and also of what makes a modern tone, they have been around for decades, right? So we've just had a little chat before we start recording about, you know, 5150 and dual rectifiers. These amps just being essentially modified vintage amps in a way. And also when it comes to things like the tubes, right? 6L6s, EL34. So these tubes, they are still used in all these modern amps. But they were around also decades ago. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the inside of the amp, what has been done and what it originally is.
Yeah, I mean, well, this amp, this particular Marshall that I have here, is a classic 100-watt Plexi or aluminum pedal. I think it's a 7T a Marshall. The small logo here, blah blah blah. But hey, it doesn't matter. This is all vintage bullshit. It's a tool, and it was my tool to have precise, tight, low-end overdrive sounds that I needed in the studio. And the tone stack is changed, so it is focusing on different mids that are not so tony for my Strat sound, you know, like with the warm 500 hertz that bloom away and have a big sound for solo, and especially when I play high strings. No, this tone stack gives me more grip and things, but the tone stack is after the distortion. This amp has also a preamp. It's a master volume. This is the gain now. Let me show you. And there's a gain boost with an extra tube stage here. So it's simply a hot-rodded Marshall with, you know, the tweaks to make a tight sound. You know, even me back in the days needed a tight sound once in a while, and you might have fun with this one also for playing your style. Let me try to simulate that a little bit with the Horizon drive and whatever, a Mercury or something that I have here in the arsenal, since we have a very, very similar switch here. That's another low cut. Mm-hmm. This pedal didn't exist when I have done the modification, but you know, things never change because it's physics. It's very simple. Lower guitars need less ultra low end because a tube stage cannot handle this kind of energy. And therefore you have to focus on the right frequencies to trigger the overdrive. And therefore you have to clean up the messy low end. Let me try. Do I have a patch cable? No, I haven't. Let's do it.
Seems you've been ahead of time back then, right?
I mean, it's obvious things. It's physics. It's things you are doing. Maybe I was ahead of time. Maybe I am ahead of time. Maybe I have no idea.
Yeah.
So,
but what you just said about the low end, that's certainly something I can confirm from my more modern perspective. I mean, if you'd listen to bands like Miss Sugar, for example, who were pioneers with the 8-string guitar, for example, what they did is they stacked a couple of amps. So it's not only one amp, but it's actually 3 or 4 amps different amps that they have on the album. And usually, if you hear the guitar tone closely, if you listen to that, then you'll hear that there's not a lot of low end going on in the guitar. So usually in modern music, I'd even say that the guitar, though it doesn't appear to people like that, but frequency-wise, it does have less low end than in, for example, blues and things like that. So they leave the low end to the kick drum, they leave the low end to the bass guitar, and the guitars, they don't have like the sub kind of frequencies, right? So I think guitar tone would start with, like, let's say, substantial frequencies. I mean, certainly there's something in the low end, but it's not too high. Yeah. So substantial low frequencies you can find around 200 hertz and something like that. That's where it starts usually, right?
Yeah. And especially the EQ before the overdrive is critical. Let me demonstrate with the Mercury. So this is, let me plug in. So, okay, reverb comes from my Mercury. So reverb off, not needed for metal. And maybe
for rhythm guitar.
Yeah, exactly. That's already a little bit reduced gain to make it towards a overdrive sound that is not too muddy. But that's just a Mercury, a vintage style amp that has a tone. Everything is set to the middle position. So here, EQ is 555, nothing special. And now I bring in the precision drive to show you what that low cut can do. Let me see. So I was not all the way up on the volume here, so you can hear that the volume changes, but the bass gets less. Let me show you. This is counterclockwise with like natural bass. And this is like the highest setting for the most low cut. So when I have this now, I can crank and get more gain. So the muddiness of a classic amp gets reduced and I have a more focus. I have not even touched anything else here. There's a drive control which is set rather low because I was not into getting more overdrive. I just wanted to tighten up the tone. And that's how you would use a pedal like that as well. I mean, the precision drive, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's just a more precise EQ Tube Screamer type of pedal. It is a Tube Screamer circuit with an added, they call it a tech switch, which is physically speaking or electronically speaking, it's a low cut with these positions that I just showed. And it has a built-in noise gate, which is something that comes very handy. We can see at this control here in the middle. Maybe. Huh? Hello? Ah. Okay. So, and that's one option. Let me show you something else, just for fun. The good old OD1 is also something that I like for tightening up low end. I hope it has a... no, it doesn't have a battery. So, let's see what this... bypass, OD1. Again, it kind of, you know, gets the whole thing one octave higher. And when I really play it, bam, it's, you know, in your face. And that's
in your face, yeah. I mean, the OD1 is also used in a lot of metal albums for exactly that purpose, right? To add some slight boost to get rid of the low end. I think it's not as popular as a Tube Screamer.
Yep.
But also certainly has an impact on this kind of tones. I feel with the OD1, and this is something, it's not positive or negative, but I think the own voicing of the pedal comes through more than if you would use a Tube Screamer.
Exactly.
Because usually, and that's what you did there, you know, just having the gain on a very low setting, this is what most people do when they want to boost their rhythm guitar metal tones. And if you do this with your Tube Screamer, you don't feel its own voicing too much. It does add some kind of mids, certainly, but still kind of neutral. While the OD1, you can sometimes hear that it is an OD1, you know, influencing the sound. Yeah.
And this is Jeff Waters, you know, Annihilator. When we met, he told me, "Oh, you have an OD1. That's the secret weapon of my so-and-so album for metal players." And I said, I bought it as a blues pedal, but I love it as a metal pedal even more. Back in the days when I bought it, it was designed to be I would say Stevie Ray Vaughan-ish kind of blues pedal, but hey, I heard better sounds out of this pedal in the metal genre.
Yeah, certainly. Also, the Tube Screamer, it wasn't invented to be a metal pedal at all, right? It was way before metal was a thing.
Yeah, but hey, just to compare, let's listen to the Tube Screamer, a few sounds here. First on bypass. Yeah, Tube Screamer makes a lot of sense. And as you said, it's not coloring too much. That's because the frequency curve of an OD1 is way more extreme than on a Tube Screamer. So in the Tube Screamer, the changes on the frequencies are not as dramatic. Just to show you, there's another option to go for, would be something like a simple equalizer. We are not talking about any overdrive thing at all, just having EQ. And such a pedal can be dialed in also to, wait a minute. That's kind of nice. I kind of dialed the bass off all the way down. And here we have a switch that gives us a mid boost. So there's a clean, which is neutral. And then there's fat, which are more or less lower mids. And there is mids, which is higher mids. Let's see what this can do. So that's the fat one. I think it's not metal, it's blues. And that's the mid boost, which again gives us the... So that's another option. We find equalizers with more controls, but basically anything that does the job will get you into the zone, into the territory of these sounds. Just because I have them here, there are some pedals like treble booster. This is again Tony Iommi, old school. Let's see.
Yeah, which is not exactly modern.
No,
yeah.
but since I have it here, we can try. Needs power, and there is power. Hello. Wrong way. Sorry. Yeah. Let's see. If you have two options, one is always wrong. And I'm choosing. Yeah, it also giving you more bass.
Also a decent tone.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't naturally navigate towards this pedal for my modern metal tones, but I think especially with like niche tones, for example, Swedish death metal.
Yeah.
I had some In Flames riffs on the medley, which we did, right? And usually these, I mean, not exactly that album, but in general, Swedish death metal has this kind of chainsaw tone, is what people call it, and certainly there's some more treble in there than in other metal tones. Yeah.
I think didn't they like the what is the Boss?
The HM2.
HM2. I do have one somewhere. Maybe not here. It's at the office. But I do have one of those. Yeah, it's.
I think that would be worth a whole episode.
Yeah. Okay, we save that for later. Okay, one more pedal out of. Oh, okay, wow! This is out of the pedal collection. It's a Friedman Brown-Eyed BOD, and this pedal, as we can hear, is designed to go in front of a clean channel because, in combination, overdrive from this pedal with the AMP1 overdrive. Hello, this is like a storm. So let's go for clean and see what it can do. And yeah, and here Mr. Dave Friedman, let's show, has some tight switch, which, or it's not a switch, it's a control where you can also dial in the amount of low end for tight. So that's a nice feature, and so I consider this also a pedal that is flexible enough to cope with low string guitar action.
Yeah, so this is less a boosting pedal like the Tube Screamer is, but it's more like a proper distortion pedal, right?
Yeah.
Which is meant to get into the clean channel, which something I should mention right away, and we've talked about it before. So I'm mostly for practicing and just noodling around. I'm mostly using the Mercury. I mean, the AMP1 is the AMP1 Iridium is what I go for if I do full metal. But just for practice and stuff like that, I use the Mercury mostly, and it's in the clean mode as well. I'm using a pedal. It's called the Rumble Seat by Analog Alien. I think the guys are from New York, and it's kind of a Marshall in the box kind of pedal. And this is something worth mentioning. The AMP1 Mercury I mean, if you already have that amp and you want to get into metal tones, I mean, the AMP1 Iridium certainly will be worth a try. However, the Mercury and the clean channel, it does take pedals extremely well. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have the budget to buy a second amp and you just have something like this lying around, you can turn the Mercury into a full metal amp. And usually with metal amps, right? So I think it wouldn't be working as good with the Iridium's clean channel, or let's say if you had something like a 5150, it also does have a clean channel. Well, no one's using it really, but it does have one. But it's not good at taking pedals. It doesn't have too much headroom. Yeah, this is certainly something that I really like about the AMP1 Mercury as well. If you're the type of person that is working a lot with a pedal board and just wants to be the amp, like to be the kind of neutral platform for taking that would be my choice all day, the Mercury.
Yeah. So I have found that the Friedman, I mean, I kind of like the Friedman pedal, because of course I have my classic background with these guys, and Dave Friedman is coming from exactly the same angle. So we have a similar taste in a way, and the way he is voicing things is sometimes also how I like it, especially when it comes to the more modern, still traditional sounds. And this is where I think the brown-eyed overdrive pedal sits nicely. And
such a nice name, the brown eye.
Yeah. Okay, maybe this was all pedals in front of a, let's say, JCM800 vintage, more style of amp. So this was in the history of the evolution of the modern metal tone, was just at the very beginning. And it still works, as a lot of old recipes still work. But we can also see an evolution in the amp design. So when we're looking back at the vintage Marshalls, and then later on the hot-rodded Marshalls with things like I have done myself, there have been the Jose mods, there have been hundreds of people modding Marshalls on this planet, or thousands even. It's like there was a Marshall modding boom, just like pedal boom these days. But
they even do official mods right now at Marshall, right? I've just seen a video last week of Rabia Mesa presenting, I don't know, some Marshall mod that they were releasing at NAMM. So it's a big...
It is a big thing. I mean, finally, Marshall is doing this after so many years. It's kind of the very late guys to the party, to their own party, basically, that they started. So, but on the other hand, it gave us a lot of great designs and engineers and sounds. And one of the guys who was lucky to find a new sound was Mike Soldano. And his SLO-100 was an amp that changed the industry when it came to high gain. Before, the amp design was, and I'm talking actually only about one tube stage, and maybe he did it on accident, maybe it happened by design, you never know, and it doesn't matter in the end. There's this magic 39K on, I think, the cathode, and this makes the one stage in the circuitry ultra low dynamic, actually, which gives you all these sweet, creamy overtones. And this was one step that was needed, because the Marshalls, they always had a certain acid-like bite, you know, from being the clean strings straight into the EQ of the amp, and then getting some overtones on top of that. But it was kind of not as creamy. And then with the Soldano circuitry, there was suddenly a creaminess. But that creaminess was exciting on one side, because the sound was very rich and full. But on the other side, it still wasn't tight for the metal guys. So the SLO-100 made it in hands of Eric Clapton and a lot of blues players and rock players, and it was the flavor of the days in the 90s. But then Mesa Boogie came along and brought out their dual rectifier. And guess what? They copied the preamp of Mike Soldano, put it in a different housing with this iconic metal front plate, adding rectifier tubes that give you more sponginess, the thing that every metal player hates because it sucks the attack, and it costs a lot of money to put this extra heavy tubes inside such an amp. And from what I know, most of the metal guys, they play the rectifier amp on this solid state silicon diodes rectifier mode. So the name rectifier was the focus on the amp. You have the choice of silicon diodes or rectifier tubes, and we are the only company, Mesa Boogie, that goes all the way, having the ultra big tubes for the power supply rectifier, and all the metal guys didn't use it. and then what happened, I remember when that amp came out, nobody knew what to do with it. There was no identification for it. And for at least 3 years, that dual rectifier was kind of sitting in shops. I was playing it and I thought, sounds creamy and big and fat, and that's cool, but it's not my cup of tea. And then the metal guys discovered it, but they discovered that they had to tighten the low end with their tube screamers to make that creamy distortion controllable and tight enough. And that was maybe the first step into a new category of metal amps, because let's say the Soldano was the first step into a new rich sound in the rock world, and then that has been modded with the guys on the rectifier with the pedals, and that became a huge thing because you could identify with this amp because it didn't look like the amp that you could see with Eric Clapton. It had the cool look, it had the power, it had, solid as a tank. I'm not saying anything bad about Mesa Boogie. It's just they had to offer this kind of rectifier feature, and their biggest hit was not to use that feature. In the end, who cares? They had a huge impact on the sound in the 90s. And then the next evolution step was the Peavey 5150 Van Halen. And they also copied that preamp stage, but they thought, you know what? I want to get a little bit extra sharpness and bite back that Eddie Van Halen was using on his vintage Marshalls. And so they added another tube stage with a hard clip after the Soldano stage. The Soldano stage is the sweet stuff, and then in the 5150 there was the sweet stuff in the middle, and they designed the front end so you could dial in also the low cut with the gain control. So when you have a 5150, you start low, it's pretty thin, then it's right, and the more you crank it, the more Soldano-ish it gets, and the more it farts out or blooms away, whatever you would describe it. But when it starts to go into saturation, it's the combination of the rectifier or the Soldano clipping plus the hard clip that only came in with the 5150. The other amps didn't have that, unless you would crank the power amps to full tilt. Then the power amp would start to give you that hard clip again. So it's kind of a combination of two different clipping characteristics that are part of a 5150. And I think the 5150 finally was the amp that probably you and most guys that are modern metal players can relate to.
Yeah, so that was very interesting. Thanks, because I'm not an amp designer, that was a very interesting background on that. And this is going back to the beginning, right, where we said that basically a lot of the ingredients that make modern metal, they have been around also decades ago. It's just the combination of different things that make the sounds as they are today. So the dual rectifier, I had a couple of tracks on the medley that still are this kind of tone, which can be very well recreated with the classic channel of the AMP1 Iridium. And still up to date, there are a couple of bands that are using that exact tone, and they do sound very modern. For example, Rammstein, they are a big user of the rectifier amps, and also Metallica, right? We have Enter Sandman on the medley, which is also something in that direction. So certainly this is a tone which is still used today. It's interesting to hear that it was kind of a shopkeeper back in the 90s. Likely then, Metallica happened and everyone was going for these amps. When I hear rectifier kind of tones, it's not as, what would be the right word? Would it be flat? I mean, it feels a little more juicy than the 5150 tones that I really like. I think I'd say that the 5150 is kind of, would be my go-to style of amp for a metal rhythm guitar tone, which could be considered modern, but it just makes sense that bands like, for example, Rammstein or Metallica, they're using these kind of amps. They have very fat and very tight guitar tones at the same time. However, their arrangements are, let's put it that way, more simple musically. So it makes sense to have an amp which still in the mids and the low end is not as reduced and as tight maybe as the 5150, because usually the 5150, I mean, there are exceptions, but bands from genres like metalcore, bands from like these modern progressive metal bands, musically, they have a lot more going on, because a Rammstein song can be recreated by having guitar player 1, guitar player 2, a little bit of keyboards, and that's it. Metallica, guitar player 1, guitar player 2, bass, drums, and that's it. Now, if you think about the typical, metalcore kind of arrangement, you'd have guitar, maybe sometimes quad recordings. You'd have an ambient guitar with a lot of reverb in the background doing some stuff. You have screaming vocals, which also again have to do something with distortion, right? So there's more going on in that kind of sense, right? And also still guys like, for example, John Petrucci from Dream Theater, he's not playing either of these amps. I mean, he did use a rectifier on some of the albums, but he's using Mesa amps, right? And so kind of the DNA should be, it's a Mark II C+ that he's using mainly, and he did all the Mark IV or 5 stuff back in the days. But again, these amps are not as reduced voiced as the 5150, and again, this makes sense. He's the only guitar player in the band. Still sounds like having 3 guitar players on stage when he's playing. So that's very interesting. I think depending on what you want to do musically with this amplifier, I mean, these two are certainly still high up in the ranks when it comes to modern metal tones. As I said, depending on what's going on musically.
You mentioned Mesa Boogie Mark II C+. That's a quite interesting amp from the aspect of an amp designer, because they started with Fender amps. Okay, Mesa, as they all American guys, started with Fender amps. It's their bread and butter business. So when you look at this amp, it's basically a Fender, and then they had the thing how to get high gain sounds back in the days, and so that's the same thing, by the way, what Howard Dumble was doing with the Dumble amps. So we have that Fender amp, and we need an extra clipping stage to have overdrive. Some people used overdrive pedals in front of the amp, and then the amp designers wanted to get that overdrive inside the amp circuitry. And when you take a Fender circuitry, you have the tone controls, bass, middle, treble, at kind of the very beginning of the amp. So there's like the first stage, and there comes already in the next stage comes your tone stack for dialing in bass, middle, and treble. And this is exactly the case on the Mark II C plus, or even the standard Mark 1 and Mark 2 and all Mesa amps up to, I think at Mark 4 they changed it. But especially the Mark 2 3 plus was kind of that vintage design plus this clipping stage, and now comes the big thing with a post EQ. And the post EQ was needed because when you have your classic tone stack in the amp, and as we learned, if there's too much bass, it sounds farty. So when you dial in such an amp, such a Mesa, for instance, Mark II C+, you wouldn't use too much bass on it. You would try to get the mids and the high end going to get a frequency curve similar to this, what I have done with these pedals. You know, try to reduce the low end, then have the clipping with their stage. But the result of that sound was very, very nasal and not rock anymore, and not even metal. So what this EQ basically was used for, I think is only a 5-band EQ on the Mesa, is getting rid of the mids, because the mids is what you kind of send into the overdrive stage with your pre-EQ dialing, and then the post EQ with this graphic EQ will bring back all the low end that is not there anymore, and maybe add a little bit of bite to your taste. But the main thing was get rid of the mids and add some low end. And so this amp is maybe, from an amp designer perspective, an amp that is in the middle of classic and modern amp designs. Later on, they got rid of the idea of having a classic 3-control tone stack like a Fender amp in front of an overdrive. Sounds horrible for metal, actually. You have to find out one sweet spot, and there, just to get that one sweet spot, you have too many components, and you have 3 knobs that basically don't do that much. And so later on, they had a fixed pre-EQ curve, like what you would dial in with that, and use the tone controls in the post-EQ options, which gives you more, way more control over the sound that you want from your amp. Because if there wasn't any post-EQ, if the cabinet was wrong, you had nothing to dial it in. You know, it was just like meh and meh, but nothing you could do. You know, it's and therefore this C plus 2, the Mark II C plus with the post EQ, was a milestone again that brought back the idea of overdrive sounds have to have a post EQ to be controlled. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, you know, I can tell. Relate to that if I would use a Tube Screamer on a clean channel without, you know, just in front of the amp as a clean channel, I mean, the type of distortion you'd get would never ever be the kind of thing that you'd like if you cannot, you know, if it's in front of the amp, you can't do anything in post. Yeah, so it makes sense. I mean, I'm not too much into these circuitries and stuff like that, but it's like as you're telling that, and I'm looking back the past 15 years that I'm playing the guitar, having tried out different things, it kind of just makes sense, and would have solved a lot of frustration if I would have known back in the day when I was just throwing random pedals in front of random amps.
I give you a real quick one on the Iridium. So we just heard the traditional stuff here. Let's listen one more time on the Mercury, then I switch to the Iridium. Sorry. As we can hear, this is already there in this territory. Yeah, it's shaped, and I'm using the classic channel right on both amps at the moment. Even the vintage channel, you know, can be used with this guitar without doing anything, and my gain is, let's put it on full. You know, it's not like classic channel. And then finally the modern channel, which is in the territory of 5150. It's not exactly because I don't copy, but I, of course, hey, if there's great things on this planet, I'm inspired. Yeah. So, yeah.
This is, I'm feeling home when I hear these tones. So I suddenly feel the desire to pick up a guitar myself and start showing the people what I would do with the modern channel and the other channels of the AMP1 Iridium.
Your turn, and you have the second part of this show. And yeah, I mean, yeah, please let us know all the details we can do, you know, from this channel in focus. I just wanted to give you a little history and evolution on where we come to this sound. I mean, there's always a reason, and it goes in steps, one step after the other. It's nothing falls from the stars, you know. It's like there's a little bit here and then there, and then you combine it, and in the combination, boom, somebody makes some magic music out of that, because the tone is right to inspire you to make certain things. And we always need people that are striving for more. And, you know, Eddie Van Halen, for instance, Peavey 5150 was Eddie Van Halen. And he was not even a metal guy, but he wanted a few things, some criteria in the guitar tone that became essential for metal. And so I'm just a fan of people that drive the industry, that drive the guitar playing, that drive the tone creations. And so I'm happy for anything new for people that try to go to the next level. And I mean, and this is why we enjoy working together, because you do the same thing also as a player. I do my thing, and this is where you go this way and I go this way. So, hey guys, enjoy the rest of the show with Emanuel and have a nice one. Cheers.
All right, we'll go full throttle now. We'll take out the shred licks, we'll crank up the gain, and we'll have a nice time. guys, how is it going? Well, this felt great, just playing the guitar with, this dude over here, which happens to be the AMP1 Iridium, which we're going to talk about today. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Emanuel. You've likely seen me here a couple of times on the channel because I just came at the beginning of this year, and Thomas brought me to bring a new touch to the metal zone of the company BluGuitar. This is what I'm doing once a month for you guys, and we're talking all things metal. We're talking metal tone, metal play, metal riffs, and all different sorts of stuff. And I'm super happy to introduce you to today's episode, which is all about modern metal tones. So I consider myself a person that is very open-minded towards different styles of music, but modern metal is kind of where I am home, really. So if I had to listen to one genre for the rest of my life, it would be modern metal, likely. There's no real definition on what modern metal is exactly. But I'd say that, starting somewhere around the year 2000, which, was the first year which we covered in the introduction video, that a couple of things have changed slightly about guitar playing, about guitar tones and stuff like that. So this is kind of what I'd say would be a good starting point to talk about when you talk about modern metal, because things like, for example, the genre of metalcore and core especially was kind of rising up in that period. We had things like melodic death metal rising up actually in the 90s, but kind of in the 2000s, these bands kind of became bigger and bigger, and this is certainly these are some reasons why I'd say the year 2000s would be kind of a good starting point to talk about modern metal. So here we are, and how else could we do than talking about this machine when we were talking about modern metal? This is the AMP1 Iridium, and this is what I'm going to use today for the full episode. So right now I'm in modern mode, and I have set up something here which is kind of not necessarily my favorite setting, because this amp has so many great sounding settings, but this is a very good starting point which I like working with. So we're on the modern channel. Gain is quite high up. It's on 8 right now, and the boost is on as well. So we got quite some distortion going on here. And then the settings, which are bass around 5, mids around 3, and treble somewhere between 4 and 5. So this is what I kind of like using. Let me turn this a little bit right for you to see the settings a little better. Yeah, this looks better. So this is something I consider quite a good starting point for modern metal, because this kind of combines all the ingredients that modern metal tones are known for, I would say. So let me play just a couple of kind of very simple riffs for you to see, to hear what it sounds like. So this is kind of tone you can expect from a setting like that. I'm combining this right now with an impulse response, of a Mesa Boogie oversized cap, which is again something very cliche for modern metal, right? Mesa Boogie oversized caps, very popular. So the signal chain is AMP1. This guitar, sorry, this is an Ibanez iron label. It is quite an used guitar, and actually broke. So I was falling from stage like 7-8 years back, and the guitar broke, and I got it fixed, and just love the guitar. And it was my first guitar, which is equipped with Fishman pickups. So these are quite nice pickups. They're not suitable for every style, I'd say. They're not perfect for every style, I'd say, but it's for modern metal. They're a very good choice. This is the guitar I'm playing right now. So first, to lead the signal chain, the first thing is the guitar goes with a simple cable into the AMP1. This goes into my computer's interface, and that's pretty much it. So on the computer, I have a software where there's an IR included, and that's pretty much it. So these were the settings, and it's just a Mesa Boogie oversized cap that I'm having loaded there in the IR loader. So nothing crazy going on, and this already is enough to give you that. That very pleasing, at the same time like tight and chuggy. But at the same time, you know, like sound with a lot of sustain if you want to play sustain. Right, which comes in very handy for like pinch 'em on. Oh man. Right, so certainly, you know, if I would just write music naturally, and I would need to set up the amp in a certain way, this would be something that I, you know, would naturally navigate towards. All right, so the tone I've used on the medley in the beginning there, the tones I've used were basically just the AMP1 with an IR. That has changed all the time. You had the settings there in the beginning. We're going to take a closer look at some of these tones right now. So this, as I said, is kind of my bread and butter rhythm guitar tone. I would do it a little different for lead guitar, but for rhythm guitar, that's really what I kind of do with this amp. And I consider this, this was very German. So I consider this to be something like a 5150 kind of tone. So we had that in the beginning, right? You know, there are so many great amps out there, and all the people, me, Thomas, and all the other guitar players and amp designers and who not, we are all inspired by each other. So certainly some of the 5150 DNA went into that channel. This is not a secret. I think it has this kind of, you know, mid-scooped type-ish voicing, still, you know, some aggressive highs, so you shouldn't put treble on a too high setting, right, when you're using the modern channel. And yeah, that's how it sounds like. So if you want to go for like the 5150-ish tone, this is the kind of setting I'd use. Now, there were many more great tones on the medley, and we'll take a look at another one which I really much enjoyed playing. So this is what I would call the Rammstein setting. I gotta load it on my software here, so it just takes a second. And one of the main differences for that channel is that for that sound is that I did use the classic channel. So it's not the modern channel, but it is the classic channel indeed. Let me quickly take a look at the exact settings, because I don't have 25 settings in my head. So what I did there was based on 5. Well, we're already there. Mid's even lower, so somewhere, you know, close to 3, somewhere like between 2 and 3. And then we had treble on 5, so it's not too much of a difference. I had even less mids, which may have to do with a different IR I was using. Again, it's a Mesa Boogie IR, but it was a different one. So let's hear how that would sound. Right, so this has a little more bite. I can put down the highs a little bit right now, and then, you know, play some Rammstein kind of riffs. Right, so let's make a quite a quick comparison between the modern and the classic channel. So this is the classic channel, same thing as I just played. Let's go to the modern channel, same settings on the EQ. Back to classic. Right, so I think it's quite an obvious difference. The modern channel is naturally more shaped to go in the direction of a certain voicing, right? As I said, it's the classical essence of modern metal to have that mid scoop, and that makes everything sound like quite tight. So therefore, it doesn't matter what you do on the EQ controls, it will have a certain voicing already, which is quite high. I mean, every preamp does have a certain voicing, but this is quite a heavily voiced channel. While the classic channel, it seems to be a little more, let's say, balanced, right? To be careful here. So it does have certainly a brighter, a bigger mid-range. And this is not necessarily a bad or a good thing. This is just a difference we can recognize in the sound that we have here. So bands like Metallica, Rammstein, they're known for using rectifier amps, and I'd say that if you were to emulate a rectifier with this amp, this will be a good starting point, starting with that channel and with the classic channel, and then putting your mids slightly lower than maybe you think you need to, and then starting from there. We can play a little bit with that setting here to see if it makes a difference. Let's put the mids down even more. I know this must feel weird for some of you, but I'm a more metal guitar player, so I'm super used to kill the mids. Let's go for this. Right, so it now sounds closer to the modern channel even, right? But still, this is a kind of simple calculation. If the overall voicing of an amplifier is already reduced the mids and reduced the mids even more, you don't have any mids anymore. If you have an amp which this is quite fat on the mids already, an amp set, a preamp that's voiced to be fatter on the mids, right? You have even more headroom to work with those. So let's bring the mids back in. So let's go from 1.8 or whatever to 3. This should be it, and see how this affects the sound. Right, so this feels certainly like a more balanced guitar tone now. It may not be as tight, but it sounds kind of juicy, which I really much like. I wouldn't necessarily use it for all the styles of music that I do, but this could be a very good tone for different styles of music than extremely fast and drop tuned kind of riffing. Let's get standard tuning up. Drop D right now. It's too stupid to tune right now, so this sounds a little bit better. Let's play a little bit with that kind of setting in standard tuning, and we'll play some fast like thrash riff. Right, so you can hear that there's certainly more information in the mid-range, again, which makes this guitar tone slightly more imbalanced. So perhaps this can even be handy sometimes when you know that you'd post-EQ a little bit off the tone, right? Why would you take all of the potential tone information out there if you know that you'll mix it later? I navigate towards these kind of tones when I do recording, which is very different from just playing, right? So if I record a proper album tone, I kind of make sure that I'm going into a direction that is where I like it. But I'm a big fan of EQing out and post, because I can take all the time in the world and then play with the tones a little bit. So I'd not overdo the mid scoop or the high cut, whatever. Cool, guys. Let me mention, by the way, I'm here. I'm live. I'm talking to you right now. So if you had any questions you want me to answer, that have anything to do with guitar playing, BluGuitar, AMP1, whatever, right? Just make sure to leave them in the chat, and I'm trying my best to answer them all. All right, so we already have one, so let's make a quick break from, you know, tweaking the amp and playing and talking, and take a little look at the questions. So the question I see here is, both AMP1s don't produce much bass, right? I mean, it's not essential for guitar, but compared to classic amps like a Vox, which is already mid-focus, it delivers much less low end. Correct. So I'd say that these amps are more balanced, and in a way that they're designed to kind of be a very powerful tool that can recreate a lot of amp sounds. So let's actually make a quick test. Let's try that. So on the classic channel, which should have some bass. If I turn it up, I have the bass on, you know, midway. Let me put it to 8. See how that sounds. This will already be too much bass for me. Let's put it up to 10. Let's see how that sounds. So, I mean, that's certainly enough bass for me. It's way too much bass for me, right? So it kind of reduces the tightness a little bit. I'd say that if we were to play on the AMP1 Mercury, which is glowing beautifully right in the back behind me, that this should have a little more bass on some of the channels. Yeah, I mean, likely there are going to be amps out there that have even more bass, and there are also other components, right? I'm playing active pickups, which are very, very, very tightly voiced. They also have a switch that makes them passive. So let's see if that does anything to the bass. Again, this is active, and this is passive. Again, active, now passive. Yeah, so it does a little bit to the bass, but it's not too crazy. It's rather adding more mids and stuff like that back. However, yeah, I thought that this was kind of a good demonstration to see how much bass headroom this amp has. It's way enough for me, right? So I won't miss anything. But what I want to say is, you know, things like the guitar also matter a lot. Passive pickups and the kind of pickups you have there, you know, certainly like PAF style pickups would have more bass than Fishman or EMG pickups. And something that is extremely important would also be the cabinet. The cabinet does a lot to the sound, and some even say that the cabinet is the most important thing of the signal chain, cabinet and mic position, right? So it would be interesting to make a head-to-head kind of comparison with another amp, but this is usually not a question I ask myself when I'm diving into tones, because I find most amplifiers have enough bass for what I'm doing. All right, let's go on. So because I have a couple of more questions, guys, ask me anything you want. I'm here for you, and let's have a great time together. One question was, is it safe to use the AMP1 without a load? It is. And I can confirm that because right now, in this moment, I'm sitting in a very old flat. This also does have very old electricity. It's, I think, built, like it's 100 years old or whatever. And I'm having a huge setup running with a couple of amps, stuff like that. The AMP1 that I'm using is going straight into my computer. There's no low box, no nothing, no power attenuator, nothing. It's just AMP1. And then we have this cable here, which is not even an extremely expensive cable, right? This is just a cheap Thomann, whatever cable, this one. And this is going straight into my computer interface. And this is where I'm recording with it literally every day for, you know, my amps are running, you know, a couple of hours every day. So I didn't face any problems in, I don't know, the best part of 5 years or so that I've been using these amps. So you can be sure that, nothing would happen if you were to use your AMP1 without a load box. All right, let's take a look at the other questions. And I'm super happy that we're receiving a couple of questions today, because that's what I'm all about, to talk with you guys, to play with you guys. If you have any suggestions, you know, want me to play certain riffs or styles of music, let's go for it. How can I create a plenty low end but tight tone like a modern tone, but sounds like 80s thrash but not scooped? That's what I'm trying for the last year from my Iridium. So Adrian, this seems to be quite a good this is a very intense question. Let's put it like that. So you're mixing up a couple of things there, which seems to be very challenging, right, and interesting at the same time. So I'm happy to take a closer look at what you're trying to do there. Maybe you could name a few tones that inspire you. So maybe a couple of bands or guitar players, right? And maybe this will I have an idea for that. But if you want to have plenty of low end, again, take the switch to the modern channel. You don't even need too much bass there. So bass on 5, and this is how it sounds. Right? So usually I'd say that this is enough low end for what I do. Let me turn up the bass a little bit to see what it sounds like. So we have bass on 7.5. Right, so this has a lot to offer in the lower registers. Again, this would be a little bit too much for me. I mean, I could live anywhere around 5 or 6. That usually does the job for me. And I would, if I was you, I would go to the modern channel, because that's where the low end is home, and then experiment with different cabinets or impulse responses. There are a couple of great impulse responses on the Blue Box, but also, it's not a secret that the internet is a huge place where you can get off all sorts of these kind of products. So I'm using a software which is called Cabinetron. It comes around, I think, 99 euros, and it does have a lot of pre-saved IRs that are very good. And I do also bought many IRs over IR packs over the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm having a lot of custom IRs, some matched IRs, which I did, and I'm using a couple of presets. Usually, if you're not pleased with the low end of your amplifier, maybe the amp, but in a lot of cases, and certainly if it is the AMP1 Iridium that you're using, I also check different IRs. Those make a huge difference. All right. So what else do we have? Another user wrote, I find my AMP1, you have to turn the knobs more than you might think you should, but this is because the EQ tends to be usable through the whole range. Well, this is not exactly a question. Sorry, I was confusing that. I think that the knobs on the AMP1, both of them, are extremely powerful. And this is something I keep saying to Thomas and everyone else when we're talking about the AMP1. It feels like on other amps, when they have a certain voicing, that you can turn the knobs forever in some cases, and not a big, there's not going to be a big change happening, which is again not a bad thing. If you're happy with the way your amp sounds, this can be something very positive. Now with the AMP1, it's kind of different. The AMP1 is not an amp that is designed to fulfill only one characteristic, because it does have 4 different preamps, stuff like that. So this is meant to be emulating other amps' sounds. This is meant to be a very flexible machine that can recreate a lot of tones. And I think that certainly translates to the knobs. And let me give you an example why I think that is the case. So we are in the modern channel, which, not a secret, my favorite channel on this amp. Let's see. So mids are on 3 right now. Let's take a closer look at the amp settings. Mids on 3. Now we can go either way. If I would put it down to like 2, it sounds like another amp. Put some mids in. I think this is a huge difference. Mids is usually where the highest frequency band when it comes to guitar. If we put now the mids on like 5 or so, right, we'll have it's already getting louder. So I'd say that these are certainly very powerful knobs. I mean, I was now demonstrating mids because mids usually make the biggest difference. As I said, mids are what makes a guitar tone. And obviously low end and high end is important as well, but it's not too much of a thing for most guitar tones. Yeah, so very, very powerful knobs that can bring huge change to your sounds. All right, I'm be back here. So we did, before I was answering a couple of these questions, and by the way, guys, if you have more questions, go for them. I'm here to answer those. But let's keep on going a little bit with what I've planned for today. So I was demonstrating you 5150 type of tones. I was demonstrating kind of dual rectifier kind of tones, Rammsteinisch Metallikisch. Let's go and take a look at a couple of other tones. So one tone I found particularly hard to recreate was the Skin Red tone. So Skin Red is a band that is doing kind of reggae, groovy-ish metal. Great band, like to listen to them in the gym a lot. And they had it. I was covering a song which was called "Give Me That Boom," and I think that the original guitar player, he's using an orange amp, which I find they sound very, very individual. Not bad, not good, but it's just the way they sound. So they usually sound quite different from other amps. And whenever I'm not working with orange amps and orange amp users too much, but the couple of times I had in my life where orange was a topic, I found it very, very hard to get into that kind of tone zone if you don't have the original thing with you. So I had quite a hard time to do that, and I found I got closest to it in the vintage channel, which is a channel that I usually don't use too much on the AMP1 Iridium. I use it a lot on the AMP1 Mercury, but not too much on the AMP1 Iridium. So that's what I did. I did use the vintage channel plus a Marshall A412 4x12 cabinet impulse response, and let me quickly check the settings again. So same topic. I did like 40 songs for this video, so don't have all of the settings in my head, but I can find out about those very quick. I can change to the second camera, and then we can go and check these settings out together. So gain is on 7 for that. Here we go. Bass is on 5. It seems that I like to have the bass on 5. It's something I do on a lot of settings. Mids are somewhere close to 4. And then we got treble, it's treble, slightly above 5, somewhere there. So this is what I did there. And let's see how this sounds. So what I do now is I'm going to go back to drop D, because this is really what this grooving type of sounds are about. So this is kind of the tone I came up with. Obviously, it's different tuning in the original, so I'm just now in standard and drop D tuning. But yeah, this is a tone which feels quite thick, and I tried to make it not too bass heavy, and still to have a certain amount of tightness in there. But this is a tone which I wouldn't use. This is a tone which I would not exactly use for faster, super tight thrash stuff. This is a tone which really suits this kind of groovy playing style. So I got a question from Adrian, from Adrian about the IR I'm using right now. So if you were asking what I was using for this kind of skin red orange type of tone, this is a Cabinetron Marshall A4x12 IR, and it sounds like this. So yeah, it's a really niche kind of tone I was going for, but I think it turned out quite good. So this also shows a different side, a more balanced side, a side that is not the most modern tone maybe, but that has more like of a juicy character to it. So yeah. Kind of a cool tone, which I wouldn't necessarily navigate to naturally, but it was a lot of fun working that out and playing with that, obviously. And I think this works particularly well with low-tuned guitars. Right now I'm having this drop D, but yeah, we'll certainly make a dedicated episode about like the 7-string and something like that very soon. So yeah. So let's go with another question. And guys, I'm super happy to answer all of your questions. I mean, whenever you have something you want to talk about, just drop it into the chat and we'll do that, right? This is great this time. Is there a possibility to turn off the inbuilt cap simulation of the Mercury when you connect it to record it out? Let's say if you want to use external IRs. Alien Love Secrets. So this is a very good question. I was asking myself that very question. The answer is yes. Technically, there is, I think, a combination of different knobs you have to press at the same time for a certain amount of time. So I'd suggest that, because I don't know exactly right now about that, but I'd suggest that you write a mail to BluGuitar, because these guys are quick and good at answering. But a workaround, a very simple workaround, which I do all the time, is I'm just going into the speaker output. I'm just going to the speaker output, which, as I said, you don't need a load box. So I'm going to the 8-ohm speaker output and I'm connected directly to my computer. And it just does the job. There's no inbuilt IR on the speaker out, obviously. So it really does the job, and you don't have to be afraid that your amp will blow up or whatever. Most simple solution I can give to you. All right. Cool. So that was the orange kind of tone. I do have a couple of more tones for you in stock. One of which would be, and I think this is a very good fit for what we're talking about right now, would be the Ghost tone. So Ghost is a metal band, or, well, it's not exactly a metal band, is it? So Ghost is a band that it's hard to define stylistically. They certainly have elements of, let's say, more vintage kind of rock vibes, but they have this evil kind of topic about Satanism and all that stuff, which they also kind of try to portray in their music. And at times, so some songs sound extremely happy, and sometimes they are trying to have this kind of Rocky Horror Show, evilish kind of music, which is just a fun band to listen and to watch, really. So I had a Ghost song on the medley. Sorry, I'm keep pushing this my second camera. So I had a song on the medley from Ghost, and I'm quickly loading the amp settings. Here we go. So to recreate a Ghost 2015-16 kind of tone, I was on the classic channel, right? Then what I did is gain on 7.5. This is kind of where it is right now, so this is good. Bass on 4, hallelujah, because I usually do it on 5 on most of the settings. And then we got mids on 3.5. Boom, there we go. And treble around 5. Right, so a slightly different channel, as what we had before, and this is how it sounds like. But I quickly need to tune back to standard, because I think this riff is played in standard tuning actually. So just a second. Super sorry, but we don't have any tone here. Why is that? Something happened here to my setup. I can't tell you what it is. Okay. This super sorry, guys, this is happening, but right now I seem to have some issue here, which holds me back from playing for you. So this is live, so these kind of things happen live. What I do is I quickly restart my DAW, which I use to play guitar, to get my guitar tones, and I'm hoping that we'll have some tone right away. So let's see what's happening here. Here we go. So we are online already, but I can't not hear anything at the time, which is a shame. All right, so I'm trying to fix that, which I'll hopefully be able to do very soon. And in the meanwhile, I quickly show you a video of the AMP1 Iridium, which I did a couple of years back. So let's have a look at that. And here I am back again, and you can likely guess the problem I had. This is something that all guitar players have. It was a broken cable. My cable just gave up. So I changed the cable. And here we are again. So this is the ghost tone for you. There we go. So sometimes it can be that simple to do the problem, right? Just change the cable and that's it. However, let's not talk about my cable anymore. Let's talk about my tone, and let's go back to the amp. So I just explained you the setting before I was switching the cable. I didn't change it. So this is a tone which again is not exactly modern. And this is something which I find very interesting, right? Because we are living in a time where, you know, let's put it a cautious way. But I think there's a certain type of tone in the metal community that kind of everyone is kind of navigating towards. And this is certainly this low on mids, you know, mid scooped, kind of low endish, very tight kind of guitar tone. And there are bands like Ghost that are sticking out from this kind of way that, you know, a lot of the band sounds. So Ghost is certainly a modern way, and a modern band in the way that they do live shows, they do songwriting. There's a huge element of like pop music in there with all these catchy hooks and stuff like that. So it's not exactly a vintage band, but they do have quite a vintage sound, and this is a very interesting combination, I think. So this tone is not exactly tight, right? If I was playing some fast riffs, right, this is not I think it's not the best tone for that, but it certainly brings across a vintage-ish kind of vibe, and really like that. Really like that. So you know, you could easily play something. You know, it'll certainly do the job for this kind of music, but it's a band that it's very modern, and sometimes. You know, when I'm listening to their music, which I do frequently, I really like what they do. You know, I find myself listening more to the guitar tones than listening to the music, because I just find it so interesting that they're going this kind of road in the 21st century, being a band that became big in the 21st century, and that hasn't its roots in the 80s or something like that. All right, while I was away fixing my problem with the cable, I see that you guys were kind of busy in the chat, which is something what I very much like. So keep on doing that. Exactly. So we were just discussing kind of the load box theme, and you know, also some other users said that you don't need a load box, which is exactly what I said. So you're right on that. So let me quickly check if there's any new discussion coming up. So yeah, this was mostly about the load box kind of theme, which we got covered, don't we? So you know, in case you missed it and you just came to the stream, if you want to use your AMP1 with an IR loader, or you know, want to record it or whatever, you don't need a load box. You can go with a cable into the speaker outputs and then go straight into your computer, and nothing will happen. I did that for 5 years or something with 2 amps, and they were both fine, and you know, they didn't get damaged in that time. All right, cool. So we got the ghost tone covered as well, and there are a couple of more tones I wanted to go through with you. One of which was the tone for Slipknot, "The Devil and I." This is a song I did in the medley, and this is a modern Slipknot classic, I'd say. Yeah, so certainly a great song. It was the first single of the album they released in 2016, it was, or something like that. So an important song. If it's the first single, right, it's always important. And it does have a very interesting guitar tone, which I try to recreate to the best of my ability. And what I did for that is I used the modern channel, which is no surprise, but I used it in a slightly different way than I would normally do. So we're on the modern channel. We put gain to 9, which is something I don't often do, but I did it on this setting, on this occasion. I got bass on 6, which is more than I would naturally do again, but this is certainly where it will get interesting. Oh, by the way, let me switch to the second camera for you to see what I'm doing on the amp. Cool. Oops, let's switch this camera setting a little bit. This looks better. Got bass somewhere on 6. I got mids on 4, so it's not an extremely juicy midish setting, but it is again more than I would do. We got treble on 5, which is also more than I would do personally. So this is an amp setting which is kind of Emanuel plus. this is kind of, you know, the general structure, which is low mids, bass neutral, and low highs. For my guitar tone, the general structure of what I would do is happening, but it is just everything slightly pushed. It was actually with a quite low tuned guitar again, which I don't have right now. But what I do is I'm going to tune my guitar to drop D, and I'm going to tell you which cabinet I have had on there, which is again a Mesa Boogie 4x12 oversized cabinet. So let's get down to drop D and see what we can do with this. All right, let's see how the Slipknot riff sounds in drop D with the Slipknot amp setting. Right, this is how it sounds, and I'm feeling very much home with this amp setting, which is something that I didn't really expect when I first set that up, because again it's usually a little. I usually work with a little less bass and with a little less highs, but this is some setting which is just a very good compromise between still having this more tightish essence, right? Having a low mid setting, having the modern channel, having something like a Mesa oversized IR happening in the background, but it is not as scooped and not as high cut as I usually do it. So therefore, while it still has a certain level of tightness and modernness, it is at the same time a little more balanced. So not as modernly colored in a way. And this is something which I think is very interesting and is way fun to play these kind of riffs with. Right, so let me just noodle around a little bit in this setting to for you to hear what it sounds like. Right, great tone out of the box, and this is something that could keep you inspired for hours and hours, isn't it? At least I did have a lot of fun playing that. All right, so the discussion about low box and stuff like that go on, so I'm not going to enter that because you guys taking care of it, which is great. Ghost is playing in Oberhausen tonight. I'd love to be there at the Ghost show. I was really thinking to go to Hanover because I know that they're also making a stop there on tour. But I'm just moving houses. I bought an old house which I need to renew. I have a 6-month-old daughter. There's just so much stuff going on this year for me that I'm not really free to join these concerts. But maybe in a year or two when they're coming back, hopefully I'll be there. Cool. All right. That was the Slipknot tone. There are 2 more tones which I want to show you before I will leave you tonight. And one of which is the tone I used for Lamb of God. Lamb of God is a band which, again, genre-wise, is very interesting. I mean, I'd say that this could be considered something like groove metal. Because Lamb of God, as soon as the music kicks in, I want to move my hat, I want to move my body. It's always like I want to dance to it, which is somehow wrong. But I guess you guys, if you know Lamb of God, you know kind of what I mean. So they just the way their songs sound, the way they play the guitar, it's so different from a lot of other bands. There's so much groove, so much rhythm in there, which is just great. So really love Lamb of God. Let's see what I did to recreate that tone, so that in case you are interested in recreating something like that, you know what to do. Let's take a look at my clever note sheet here. I went to the modern channel. I got gain somewhere around 7. All right, then we got bass on 4. We got mids on 3 point something, so 3.5 kind of, and treble on 4.5. That's what I did on the AMP1. And then we'll take a quick look at my DAW, and we'll see that I was using a Mesa Boogie 4x12, but not an oversized. So it's a different IR which I was using. I can't really tell you what it is exactly, but what I can tell you is, what I can show you is definitely how it does sound. So here we are with a Lamb of God setting. Oh, almost. There was one button I missed to press. I did it now. So this is how the Lamb of God tone sound. I think this kind of this is kind of how they played the riff. I think there are a couple of errors I did there while playing, but forgive me. So I think you kind of know what you kind of mean, understand what I mean by it makes one to dance, because there's so much groove in it, and they have this kind of groove while still having a high tempo kind of vibe to it, which is very good. So this tone, again, it is in the modern channel. It's not using that classical Mesa Boogie oversized cabinet that is used in a lot of modern metal kind of occasions, and it does have little bass, little treble, and kind of not too little mids. 3.5 is quite something on the AMP1, because usually it's kind of mid-heavy amp. It sounds very balanced. It doesn't sound too scooped, but it does have a darker touch to it. And this is something which I very much like. I like dark sounding guitar tones. I don't need my guitar sounds to be cutting through all the time or stuff like that. I like it when the guitar sits in the mix rather than cutting through. And this is something that you can certainly achieve with this tone. So let's play some more grooving kind of riffs. Tune, but nevertheless you'll hear what this is sounding like. All right, this is another interesting tone which I want to show you, because again, it's slightly different. It also shows the different sides and different angles you can that the Iridium modern channel does have, right? It certainly is voiced a little more scooped. I admit that. I really like and love that about this channel. But if you put the mids back in, if you don't overdo the highs, right, then you'll also be able to get a more balanced and slightly darker tone that is not exactly cutting through all the time, that there's just would sit nicely, right? Okay. What about boosting is a question by Adrian. So I'm basically having the boost on all the time, right? As you can see that here, and we had the discussion in the beginning with Thomas, right? In the second clip we showed after the modern metal medley that we did. Basically metal guitar tones are heavily relying on boosted amplifiers most of the times. A classic boosting pedal would be the TS808 by Ibanez, and also Maxon. They think they manufactured those for Ibanez back in the day, but also they have a very good Tube Screamer, and this is usually what I would use, a Tube Screamer kind of pedal. The AMP1 Iridium does have a boosting function, which is totally fine for me. So if I was playing live, I'd use that all day. I sometimes use it for recorded tones as well, but sometimes I just like to have a pedal in my hand and play around with it, similar to what Thomas does. So you also have control on the side, which I can't exactly show you now with my camera setup that I have here, but you can also control the boost on the AMP1 on the side controls here. And this will allow you to modify the boost in a way that would suit your needs likely. If for some reason you want to still buy an external boost, I go for Ibanez TS808, Maxon OD808, I think it's called. There are plenty of more options. So you can take an OD1 by Boss, which also discolor a little bit more, but also a good choice. So those would be the classic options for boosting amplifier if you would like to just have an external pedal. But most of the times the boost is on the AMP1, because this is just what I really much like. The boost is adding some mids back again, which that I'd likely by what I've told you this evening, something I like to take out. It's kind of a paradox thing to take out the mids and then put them back, but this is what musicians and engineers do all the time. Like some of the greatest engineers, sound engineers that I really love. If I see their mixes, it's all taking place with the ears so they at some point they take out something which they would slightly add back again later or something, and still makes sense, right? So this is kind of the same thing with these guitar tones. I like to pull out all the mids and then take a tube screamer in front, which will then tighten up the low end and put some mids back again. So yeah, some like the most the most iconic move of modern metal, I would say, boosting with the TS8 right in front. All right. Cool, man. So you got the max already, so I think you're good to go. What I would do if I was to try the following setting: put the gain on 0 on the lowest setting that is possible, put tone on max, if not on max, somewhere at least 50%, 60%, but maybe even more than that, and then put level all the way up. Right, so 0 gain, 100% level, and then tone quite high, at least midway. And this is going to be a setting that will, deliver killer boosting tones on metal. Cool. All right. Yeah, that was the Lamb of God tone, and the last tone I want to show you for tonight's episode would be the In Flames tone that I did. So In Flames is a very important band for modern metal. Those guys could be considered like pioneers of Swedish death metal, or melodic death metal, if you will. They've been around since the 90s, I think, and again, the 2000s is where they really took off, right? So that was kind of their era of modern metal. And still around nowadays, super successful band. So just a great act to see and hear. What I did there was putting again gain on 8, so we're kind of there already. What I did was putting bass on 4. Then I did put mids only some slightly above 2, right? Because Swedish death metal is the peak of mids. Mid scooping, I would say. I think there's no other genre that has that little mids, other than great guys like Dimebag, which we did cover in the last episode. So again, this is episode 2 of 2, right? So if you're not too much about metal in the 2000s and beyond, this is certainly okay, because there was great metal around before the 2000s already. So what you could do and should do is go to our channel and watch back the episode we did a month back. So it was on, I don't know, something in the mid-April, where we were talking about metal tones before 2000, and we had bands like Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Metallica, Slayer, Death, Pantera, Dream Theater, Symphony X, a lot of these bands, Black Sabbath. We even did have Deep Purple. So there's a lot to discover there as well. And if you're a general fan of metal, stay a couple of more minutes with me and then go back watch it. If you're more of a fan of vintage metal, go there straight away. Cool. All right, last setting I want to show you for today is the In Flames setting. Let's go back to this. So I set the amp up due to what I noted while recreating the tones for the medley in the beginning, and the cabinet I'm using here is a combination of 2 different cabinets actually, and this is Marshall 4x12 B style cabinets, and what I did there is basically having the same cabinet 2 times, but I was voicing, so EQing them in a different way. These are quite drastically cut on the highs and then not too much processed on the lows. So this is going to be a quite dark guitar tone, which I think really makes the early In Flames 2000s era. So So this is a tone that is just, extremely joyful to play when you're playing rhythm guitar. I mean, again, it was good at the time. It's still good right now. It's still a very joyful tone. It's not exactly what I would go for if it was up to me, but this is a tone which is as you're playing, super pleasant. It has all the low end, right? It is not too much cutting, which mostly I enjoy when playing the guitar. I don't really like tones with too much treble if it's metal, not too much treble if it's metal. Sentence of the day. And as it has so much low end, as the chugs are really coming through, right, this is something which just is so much fun to play, especially when you're on, like a drop tune or something like that. So let's do a little more riffing. Right, this is such a great tone, and really much enjoying to play that. You can't just repeat me. Adrian, thanks for telling that I'm playing tight. The truth is, I'm not feeling too well today, so I'm a little bit feverish and sweating and stuff like that. Was very much worried about how I play tonight. So trust me, there would be even evenings where I could play a little better. But I'm super happy that you're fine my playing well. So this kind of tone, it's not exactly a shredding classic lead tone, but sometimes I really find it pleasing to not have too much highs on lead tones as well. So this could also be fun for some. Right, so I really much, I think that there's a thing which sometimes we tend to forget, which is that real guitar cabinets, right, not IRs, but real guitar cabinets, they don't really produce a lot of material above like 5K. And modern music, does have a lot of air frequencies, so very high-end kind of frequencies, which makes sense in some places, but I don't really enjoy it on guitar, so I naturally navigate a little bit more towards dark tones as well, and this is just a great tone that In Flames were creating back in the 2000s. All right, guys, I think that this is it for today. So the history of modern metal, we did it. We did a riff for every year starting from the year 2000 until 2024, ending with my own band. Skytribe is my band. So if you like the riff there, please check it out. Feel free to check it out on Spotify and YouTube and on all the other platforms. But we did it 24 riffs in a row, different tones, different styles, different bands, all played and recreated with this very amp, the AMP1 Iridium, which certainly is a good pick if you want to have an affordable amp that is extremely diverse, that can recreate a lot of iconic tones, but that also inspires you to play around with and tweak your own settings, right? So I hope that you liked today's episode. I'm super happy that I'm super happy that you guys were just active in the chat, interacting with each other, asking questions and stuff like that. You're very much welcome to do this every time that we do the live stream, and especially when I'm here, I'm always having a look at the channel to see if I can help you with something. And this is certainly something that is super fun for all of us. All right, so hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe if you did not subscribe already, and don't forget to tune in next Wednesday when Thomas is back here again, and I'm going to be here again next month. So keep an eye out on the BluGuitar social media, where we'll announce the streams about metal and modern music that I do once a month, right? And I see you then. Have a nice one. Thanks for tuning in, and see you.